We're live.
Good morning.
Good morning. I feel like we need a director who says action. Good morning. It's 9 o'clock. Where's our screen? Oh, there we go. It's 9 o'clock and it's January 5th, 2025. And welcome.
Yeah.
So the title this week is "Oh shit, what do I say?" said the fairies. It's funny because I wrote that. I'm like, the fairies are not inhibited and unsure what to say. Right?
Mm-hmm.
The fairies being the archetypal realm of delicious
Well, but part of this, what they say can be not saying anything. You know what I mean? So that's that's
Yeah.
included.
And so I was feeling it in terms of communication because my work continues to be about speaking and like stepping into this zone of very much like on my own of being really clear about. It's a little bit like what you were saying just before we started talking about sort of the blame of like, oh, if only this person would do this and this person would do that, and
Then
yeah,
then my life would be
right,
better.
or
Than
even
her.
just being pissed at the feelings of what people do, and it's like I've been angry my whole life, and I'm just feeling this place of being more immediate in like things that feel okay and don't feel okay to me, and discerning whether or not to speak, and also what that opens for me is this place of not of it's like it opens up at a place of actual like uncertainty because I'm just saying the thing. But then it was interesting. I was talking with a friend of mine, this paradox of like, but then in being in that place of uncertainty, if we can just be in the feelings that we're in, it's actually a place of certainty. Like the place of not knowing can be a place of groundedness and certainty.
Yes, that's. I feel like that's like a rewind and say again. Yeah, Yeah, I mean the place of
Bring it back.
unknowing can be the place. A place of the place of uncertainty can actually be a place of certainty in the on the feeling.
Right,
You
because
know.
that's ultimately all we have is the certainty of what we're feeling. I mean, certainly the certainty of safety is important, but we don't really ever have that. Like another thing that happened this week that has been opening things for me and is still like a really big mystery is this person I know, who was a client of mine for about 12 years,
Oh yeah.
passed away. And really funky, like he probably wasn't getting the care that he needed. Like there's all these different dynamics around it. It's really tragic. He was really awesome. Like he was so full of life. Like he would come in and he would say like, "Ben, guess what?" I'd be like, "What?" He's like, "They're putting in a new Starbucks in Rutland." And he would want to talk about that the whole set. Like, it was just so delightful. Like, and he passed away. And there's a lot of anger. Like, basically, there were like a lot of questions of what other people did that were really negligent. Um, and so this group that I'm working with, there's a lot of people are really both having to grieve and also be angry about the situation. And I don't like. I'm not even sure where I'm going with this. Like I'm feeling like the grief of the loss, which feels unreal because that's part of like losing somebody the brain can't understand. Um, so I'm going into a little bit of the trauma place, but yeah, it's like being able to be in the certainty, including the grief, like that. What the feeling of like, aside from all the story, for me, it's like what just feeling the grief
Well, he's
feels like.
gone. Yeah.
What feeling the grief feels like in my body, right? It's like because one of the places of my dream is this other person I know is walking down this hallway, and he's kind of not engaging with me, and I just feel like what's going on, and then I see that he has this huge wound on his back, but meanwhile there's this other man there, and so instead of the projection onto this guy who I've known for a long time, and he's sort of like ignoring me, and then it could be like what's wrong with me, what's wrong with him, all this shit, instead the animus is just there holding this space. And what I've been feeling, especially yesterday, it really came up when I'm in that place of grief. It was helpful to have this conversation about uncertainty with this friend of mine because it got me into it. And what I was able to feel is that in this place of grief, I feel it. Like I can feel it in my body. And it's this real wobbly place of having just seen this guy last week. And now I'm never going to see him again. Mm-hmm. And whatever that death thing feels like in my body, and I can be there, and there I also feel the animus. It's like, which feels really, really like he's right here in this place of uncertainty. Mm-hmm. Just like he's right there in the dream in this place of this other person being wounded and what should I do or not do. It's like that's also feels like a real big place of uncertainty. And then it tied back to the theme of speaking. It's like, that's what do you say? Because me and 3 other people in this group were writing our thoughts and feelings about this guy.
Mm-hmm. Not about all the stuff about.
Well, that's the question. In writing it, in writing my feelings about him. Like seeing about feeling all of it, and obituary is so much often about like the good, like the da-da-da, right? And some people wrote these really touching things about and this makes me cry a little bit, like he's with his mom, he's with his grandmother now, he's at peace now. And I can feel that, like I feel that sort of like entering into another realm place. But that also wasn't my experience because I didn't want to feel the solace of that in a way, or it's not that I didn't want to, like I could feel the solace of it a little bit, but for me it was like I actually want to feel the grief. I want to feel that grief feeling. And so it was like, what do I say? I wanted to I wanted, and it was great because I just wrote it and it came like all these memories of being with this guy. But I also wanted to write and acknowledge like the horror of this thing happening, and to just like write that also. So it's like all of that I could feel came from a place of like what I'm feeling versus this thing that could easily get spun out into what this person did or didn't do.
Right. Well, yeah.
And I just don't want to. I'm not saying for other people not to do it. I just don't want a part of that. Like I don't want to go into it too much. I can go into it a little bit in terms of the conversations, but so all of this comes back to the theme for me about like what do I say, not from a place of what's the right thing to say here, which is how it used to be for me. Which is when I'm being Leo the lawyer, versus like the other place of just being curious, being Leo the lion is just
which is love. That's love,
Yeah, and how that's tied to what we say and what we don't say. When
I haven't really thought about. About this or this theme, but what, as you're talking, what occurs to me is how easy it is to think about, like to get overly, for me, I guess, to overly think about, like, what do I say? How do I say it? Should I talk? Should I not talk? Like, and how, or like needing, and that's connected to like needing to know something or feeling like I need to be seen in a certain way. Is
it also tied to like needing a particular kind of response or hoping for a particular kind of response?
Probably, but I can't feel it that far. But my point being, how I feel now in the past couple years, especially, but is that because of the work that I'm doing with my dreams, and like I feel like this is a kind of an offshoot side benefit of doing this work with dreams is like the dreams really teach can like for me I feel like my heart has been is in a honing process and like part of that is just having that discernment like that discernment which is growing from a natural way, not because I am specifically working on discernment, but because I'm feeling the feelings that the dreams bring up. And then as a part of that, what happens is like it's like a sloughing off of like these old ways and a sloughing off of like the other stuff, the stuff of like needing and overthinking and you know having to really I don't know what the word is, but like looking outside or like just so I can't just be spontaneous. So but what happens is like that my heart is you know having a clearing like and that honing, and so then I can speak in a more discerning way and I can discern when is the time to not speak at all. And I'm in fact I realize as I'm talking I am having some specific experiences where, or I have had in the past week where I spoke and I shouldn't have spoken, and it's like so funny because it's not a big deal. It hasn't been like, oh gosh, I was at work and I was in a meeting, or I you know, or I was with a client and I said a thing that I shouldn't have said. It's been like very, you would think like very innocuous, where I just am saying something very like I'm in the kitchen like you know doing dishes or putting dishes away, and like my partner comes out and I just say like a thing that's just so everyday, but the response is like really weird. The response that comes, how that's responded to, is very strange, and like it's like very, I don't understand it. Like I'm like, this is confusing, and I realize that I just shouldn't have said that thing. Like it actually, what I said was not, there was no reason to say, like I just didn't need to say it. And I think that was what it was. It wasn't like that I was in trauma and it was the confusion of and cloud of trauma. It was just that I didn't need to say that thing. I was just like saying something to say something, or just unconsciously speaking. And that happened 2 times, and I was like, I was like, okay, like seriously, not a fan of that. Like so I really was like, in the second time it happened, I was like, okay, I don't want to do that. You know, I don't need to say that, and why was I saying that? And just next time, you know, I hope that I can not do that, because that what that creates is like a weird thing. And I think the weirdness is because I was feeling something and I spoke, but you know, and I think I needed to just keep it. Yeah. Just keep it. So that's part of it. You know, it's part of that discernment. And I find that as I get older and do like more work, I have less to, I talk less for sure.
Interesting. Oh shit. Oh shit. So the fairies is speaking
particularly less. At work, like most particularly at work at the restaurant, you know, and even with clients, like I'm oftentimes if there's a way that like if nothing is coming from the other place, like from my heart, from what there's this kind of flow feeling that I feel that is like can be very, it's like this particular energy, and if nothing's coming, I don't speak. So instead of trying to fill, I've learned to sit with that discomfort, and instead of feeling like I need to fill the air with garbage or just with something to not be uncomfortable, I just don't say anything. And it's great. It's so great. It's like I much prefer it.
What does it feel like?
It feels, oh my gosh, it feels incredible. Like, because it so much opens. I feel like I'm then in this open ground of like being in the dream and just holding and just being there and staying in the energy of being in that dream of like the liminal space of the
Mm-hmm.
dream. And then what can happen is often something will come up for the client that is the thing that
Mm-hmm.
I that just naturally comes. It can be a
Uh-huh.
feeling, it can be just like tears and tears, like weeping, weeping, weeping. It can
Mm-hmm.
be like, oh, like a connection that's made that wasn't made before. That
Mm-hmm.
So something naturally comes,
Like in the
or
space.
yeah, with the space and holding that space
Right.
in the openness and knowing that it doesn't need to come, it's not coming from me,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Mm-hmm.
and it doesn't, it does, and just trusting that place of trusting the dreams like that
Mm-hmm.
much, and trusting my, yeah, the space that I hold, in sessions.
Right. And that can be the oh shit space. Because
Yeah.
it's like the liminal, like whatever the descriptions of these words, it's like, to me, liminal is that you don't know what's going to happen. And there's such a, one of the things that I've been feeling a lot for myself, like my place, I still go back to the dream. It's interesting because I'm not really remembering my more recent dreams and my work, but I keep going back to this dream where the kids are all coming in through the window, and I'm like, you guys have to leave. This isn't okay. Like, I'm just pissed, and it's like not okay, and I'm clear that it wasn't okay. Um, is like a moment of a like lack of confusion. The confusion comes in afterwards as I'm like, I don't know if I should have done that.
Mm-hmm.
And the dream, so it was really helpful when I was taught or learned and then experienced that if we feel confusion in the dreams, it's trauma. Like that it's sort of this really simple equation.
Mm-hmm.
And that trauma, like that confusion, like when we're not in trauma, we're not confused, which doesn't mean like we see and know all of it.
Right.
We can be in this uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
and that's different than confusion
Mm-hmm.
in some way. Like that's
Mm-hmm.
what I'm feeling. It's like there's confusion up here in the mind and all that. The brain so desperately wants to figure this shit out. But beneath that is this place of uncertainty without the confusion.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I'm not sure. Like I did this thing and now I don't know what's going to happen. Instead of like the self-questioning thing that our brains so often want to do, like, oh, was that the right thing or the wrong thing, or then how this person's going to react. It's like so fucking liberating, and that's a lot of what I've been experiencing. Is like, just it's uninhibited place of just being able to say whatever, just like children say whatever. That only gets kind of like pushed down when you're like, well, you're supposed to be polite or what, all those other whatever, all the ways that we try to cast certainty on this uncertain experience of being a human being.
Right, and for me, confusion. I mean, it's a great example. It's another example of how one word, and that word comes up a lot, and for me, with people I work with in dreams, and it's so specific. It's not just one, it's not just one thing. Your confusion is different from my confusion, is different from the people, whoever else's confusion and experience of that. For me, in my body, how I experience confusion is, and that's how I knew that in the sort of vague examples I gave with the talking when I didn't need to talk and shouldn't have talked. I wasn't in confusion. I was like, like what's happening is not, but confusion for me is like, it's like it's way up. It's almost like out of my skull. It's like way up at the top of my head. And I mean, most of my pathological stuff is like, I feel it way right at the top of my head, almost as things like energy, like staticky energy, like that can't get out or whatever. It's like really distracting.
Mm-hmm.
And but confusion is like, it's like a swirling cloud, and it makes it so I can't see. And
Mm-hmm.
it really, it's like it is a cloud, and so I can't perceive anything correctly. I'm no longer perceiving anything. I'm unreliable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like where I'm like, I don't know what's happening, and then it gets really scary, and I feel like then I start to leave my body. I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, and I'm way out there.
Right.
Versus like uncertainty is like the feeling for me of uncertainty or just unknowing, like a not knowing, is like in my belly and
Mm-hmm.
like in my pelvic floor, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like, and it has a whole different feeling. It's not as fat. The vibration of it isn't fast. It's like a low humming feeling. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like the more time that I spend with it, the more I'm like, oh, okay. Like, yeah, like it feels
Mm-hmm.
like I like it or whatever. Like I've made friends with it, or
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh, okay, I want to stay here because there's something here,
Mm-hmm.
and it can, sometimes it can feel like fear. There's a level of fear to it because it's
Mm-hmm.
so uncomfortable. It's like, okay, and I need to, that's a good place if I can catch it to be mindful to stay, because it can start to spiral
Mm-hmm.
up and like
Right,
get
like
into my
feeling
head.
where.
So my head's like, whoa, what's happening? Let's try to identify this thing. Like,
Mm-hmm. Where it is in the body.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And another piece that comes up for me is like that place of being able to feel the support, right? So it's like
Mm,
I had parents who couldn't tolerate uncertainty. Like they created such a clear edge of like clarity of their experience, like this creation of the clarity of their experience, which was so caught up in anxiety and anger and all this, but it was like at least you could expect it. At least it was
mm-hmm,
like a constant baseline
mm-hmm,
of just sort of like an opinion and
mm-hmm,
a perspective of the world and what people should, like they were real into what people should be doing differently. And
mm-hmm,
so when I didn't have any space for, I don't know what's going on, like there was very little space for curiosity, right? So
mm.
like, because
Well,
curiosity is like the sun side of uncertainty. And what's really profound for me is like not, it's like not a mind thing of like, oh, I'm going to say this or I'm not going to say this, or like, oh, I feel uncertainty. Like there's this level of support that's there for me. That's why this dream with the animus guy being there is so profound, because I feel an other there with me in
mm-hmm.
the uncertainty,
Right. Yes.
right?
Yes.
Versus
Yes.
like being a
Yes.
little terrified child.
Mm-hmm.
Uncertainty to me was severely dark and nihilistic, So I don't know if I've told the story here before, and if I did, you may not have heard it because it's not like we have these regular listeners who are getting, you know, bored with they tell that specific story again. But I had this experience, one of my early experiences, like when I was 5 or so, where I was talking about death, not something that 5-year-olds really should have that much awareness of, on some level, because it's so incomprehensible even to us as like fully formed adults. But I remember thinking like, oh, or talking with my mom, like, oh, we're dead. Like the concept of infinity. It's like time has been forever before we were born, and then we're born for this little bit of time, and then there's infinity after we die. And I threw up. Like it was such this existential thing. And I just feel for this poor little boy who's like, that was the level of fear that was projected out onto everything. It's like, that's like the thing with nihilism, or just this like real existential experience. It's like that gets, things become meaningless. Like things become meaningless. Like that, this, and that on some level, I think is the certainty.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the philosophy of nihilism is the certainty that everything's meaningless, or like, which to
Mm-hmm.
me is, I have to say, complete fucking bullshit. It's
Mm-hmm.
like total bullshit because I can speak from a place of knowing that existential experience of everything being meaningless, and it's such a
Mm-hmm.
physiological protector, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just not fucking
Mm-hmm.
true, but it could be argued that it is, right?
Yeah. Right. Well,
But
yeah. Well, that's part of
yeah,
it too.
but
Let's.
like for me, it's really wonderful talking about that experience now as a boy because I feel so held and supported in thinking about that place now. It's like that was just the wrong way of thinking about it in some way. You know, like
Mm,
there's this comfort that I can feel, and I think that that's part of what I feel with this like animus support is like, yeah, okay, and I don't know, I don't. There's just a different experience of being there.
mm,
Like I don't feel
mm,
this like terror because talk about the ultimate talk about the ultimate confusion.
mm,
Like it
yeah.
doesn't make any fucking sense,
Right.
and it's so
Right.
paralyzing.
Well, like it goes back. It's so fully connected. It's another example of like not having support because I had the opposite experience like
Mm.
when I was a kid, and I
Mm-hmm.
feel like kids are amazing because we're we're so close to we're closer to having just been born, you're closer to death in the same, you know what I mean? And you're closer to the doorway.
Mm-hmm.
So like all that curiosity about death and stuff is like there's nothing attached to it. It's just pure curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And like when my grandpa died and I was 6 and I was there and then like my grandma when my grandma died and when my friend died on the playground like when we were playing, I was just like I didn't have this sounds so weird. But like I had no fear about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was just like it I just felt like it I don't know, it felt normal or something. Like, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Brenda dying on the playground was like, it's not that that felt normal, but like, because it was like the way, yeah, it was like scary to be playing with her, and then she fell, and I was like, I knew it wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
But like, everybody else, it's like what I was saying when I was, everyone else was totally freaking out in all
Mm-hmm.
those instances,
Mm-hmm.
except my grandpa, because yeah, whatever, except my grandpa people, it was like really peaceful. But I was the first one who knew that he had died. And so like I just had a different experience, but I had tremendous, I, at that time in all those times in my life, I was still connected. I was really working in my connection. Like
Mm-hmm.
I had an active, like spiritual connection that I was really like, was really, part of my life,
Mm-hmm.
and so it wasn't, I didn't get weird about, yeah, that sort of more existential stuff, or it's just not how it showed up for me. Like my
Mm-hmm.
nihilism was not around that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really fascinating and so like devastating, that story that you told, and just throwing up
Mm-hmm.
and just like what I feel in that, or what I'm aware of, is just how alone you were. It's
Mm-hmm.
another example of just how alone you were in the house with your
Yeah.
you know
And then the
parents.
uncertainty is so terrifying and creates this, you know, physiological shutting down in the body,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing is, like you had said, clarity, like about your parents, and something about clarity. And to me, I guess I realize when I think of clarity, I feel it as like a spiritual thing or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel it as not an intellectual thing. I
Mm-hmm.
feel it as like a feeling
Clarity.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, because
100%.
I'm like, when you were saying about your parents, and I'm like, oh, well, the experience that the atmosphere that was my house growing up, was
Mm-hmm.
a father who had just so much unexpressed anger, and so like I had it, that created an experience, like in a way, it was, I guess it was clear to me, but it wasn't clear to most people. I don't know, it's like one of those things where I was like, what is happening?
Mm-hmm.
I was like, it's clear to me that something is happening here.
Mm-hmm.
Something is happening. There are a lot of unexpressed things happening in
Mm-hmm.
my mother and my father.
Mm-hmm.
Less unexpressed, well, different unexpressed things. And like my sister expressed reactively a
Mm-hmm.
lot,
Mm-hmm.
but unexpressed grief, unexpressed agonizing, pain
Mm-hmm.
and probably fear and whatever. But so it just like that was confusing to be
Mm-hmm.
like, this is what's being said, but it doesn't, that's not how it feels. It's like didn't feel right. I'm like, something is not what's the word, like congruent or
Mm-hmm.
like gel, like I'm like, it's like when someone's saying I love you and doing something really shitty and you're like, this is not love, like it's like
Mm-hmm.
how confusing that is, like that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't match up, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that was just an interesting thing for me to get while you were talking. I was like, oh, that's not, yeah, there's clarity and then there's clarity and like there's the clarity of the
Yeah.
body and the feeling, sensuality
Right.
and like deep,
Right.
depth of heart,
Yeah.
soul clarity.
Well, I don't think we can experience confusion in our body. I think we can have
Mm,
curiosity about what's like. I don't think the body is ever confused. I think
mm,
things happen. At least this is my experience. The more
mm,
I think about it and feel it, the body is just experiencing what it's experiencing, and one of the things I've learned for myself is to just be curious and open to the different feelings in the body, right?
mm,
Like that's part of where like Leo the lion shows up versus Leo the lawyer. So confusion is like the brain's attempt to figure out what's going on in the body
mm,
on some
mm,
level
mm,
and projecting out into the external experiences of what's going on in the world and trying to make sense of them. And so, for example, when I am in my dream and this person is walking by and not really acknowledging me, seems to be sort of in this gruff thing, and then as he walks past, I see he has this big wound on his back. There's like two ways of being in the dream. One is all the questions, like why is he acting this way? What am I doing that he's acting this way? I mean, what is that wound on the back? Like, how does that tie to what he's feeling, or why he's treating me the way he is, or why I'm feeling treated the way that I am? That's all confusion, and then but in the body, there's just the feelings of each little moment of the dream, like when he turns the corner and there he is, and I feel a little like, whoa, and then he's not acknowledging me, and I feel like, huh, and then I see the wound, and I'm like, oh, there's something's going on here. Like, that's more of a feeling
right.
versus
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
trying to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, and then meanwhile, there's just this animus guy experience there who's also there with me, and I just now, even as I love talking about it because I just feel more deeply into it as I talk and express, I just can feel him in this place of there's just like this kind of ultimate connection of not needing to figure out what the fuck's going on.
Well, right, yes, and not in your brain. You were like, when you were talking about, you were like, oh, something's going on, and that's like that's perfect because it's like instead of the brain saying like this is what's happening, like projecting an exact thing, and trying to convince or what, just like so you can then feel like that's what exactly what the brain does, and when we're scared and when we don't know is like this is what it is.
I'm thinking of Only Murders in the Building, where they put up these boards of like all the clues and the different people and all that. It's just it's just fun because they're always like, oh, this is this is this is this, and then they're totally fucking wrong. And there's like the bumbling of it, and there's just something so great about. I have this client who I work with who really struggles with clear thinking and really severe trauma reactions, like due to all sorts of stuff, developmental disability, and just how kind of fucked up wired his brain is because his parents were addicted to drugs, just sort of that, what that can all do. And he was the one who taught me to say, instead of that trying to figure out a problem, is that it's a puzzle.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. So it's like we talk about things as being a puzzle.
Oh.
And then there's all these pieces in the puzzle, some of which we just we haven't found.
Mm-hmm.
We like haven't, now we're like, the first step is like, if I was going to do like a thing about how to live life, it's like the first thing is acknowledging that it's a puzzle. And then the second thing is just being open to what pieces you have and what pieces you don't have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And seeing if those pieces come together,
Mm-hmm.
but then recognizing and acknowledging that there's other pieces. This is the beautiful thing about the subconscious work, is like there's all these pieces to the puzzle that I've experienced it only through subconscious work do we even see that piece. Does that piece of the puzzle even start to like be witnessable? Because so much of like the puzzle pieces are just this subconscious stuff that we don't know, but we don't know what they are, but they're pieces of the puzzle of what our experience is, without a doubt or question. We just don't have the piece. And so it's the beautiful thing of when like, and then sometimes when we say something, a puzzle piece emerges. Like it's not without, sometimes we have to take an action for this puzzle piece to show up, as opposed to just figuring it out. Like the action itself manifests the puzzle piece. And then we've got another piece of the puzzle, we don't know where it fucking fits. And that's the beautiful thing about doing dream work with people. I've gotten so much more comfortable with somebody having a dream and being like, well, we'll look at this tomorrow, or we'll look at this next week, because what's emerged is a piece of the puzzle, and we don't it's
Don't
gonna
want to shove it.
well,
into
right, it's gonna
place
fit when it fits. When we have that aha moment, that's when it's gonna whoosh, right? And like that isn't necessarily gonna come within the hour of the therapy session. It almost always does, which is kind of crazy, especially like in the last minute. It'll be like. Right, but I've gotten so comfortable with like, okay, like we're just starting to feel all the puzzle pieces of the dream from 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. Like 3 years ago, sometimes it's like, oh,
right.
You know, like
I'm like they'll bring up somebody in a dream, and I'm like, oh right. This is the first time this person has showed up in a dream, but I remember you had this person in the dream like 3 years ago. And I'll like search on my computer, and I'll be like, put in the name, and it'll come up and read that dream, and we're like, oh my God, that's what was going on in that dream. The dream is all the way over here. Like, here's the puzzle piece, but here's a little puzzle piece that you're not going to see for months, years. But then it's like, oh shit, that's like, because we have the sense of what was going on in the dream, but only to the degree of where we are in terms of what we're feeling then.
Right.
But the deeper we go, the more these experiences start to feel more full. Like even as I'm talking about this experience that I had when I was 5, which wasn't a dream, I'm experiencing it differently now. Through all the healing, right? So I'm experiencing, so it's making so much more sense. Like it's like even that thing that I said about how clear my parents were, like how they created this narrative, and there was no uncertainty in the narrative. The narrative happened to be fucking awful. It was impoverishment. It was just all sorts of shit. But it's like, oh, that's why I was so desperate for feeling safe and okay back then as a 5-year-old, and tripped up on this thing that was so the essence of like aloneness and all this shit. But now I can feel it from this moment of like, oh, there's this animist love, fatherly feeling that still feeling like a clearer piece of the puzzle every time I can feel back into it. And then from that place, I'm able to bear witness to this boy who was so smart in a way. Like, my brain was advanced enough to understand concepts, I think, that it shouldn't have been able to be, like, in terms of grand existential, like, things. My parents were so intellectual. So,
Yeah.
I feel some energy in my cheeks. Maybe that's part of the freeing up of saying things.
Yeah. Yeah, I never really realized until really, I don't know, the past, I'm not sure, few years, how much you and I share this, but how it is in the speaking that, like, it's like, when I start speaking, they're like energetic arms come out and like sweep all these things together, like, speaking of pieces or something, like, where it's like something's gathered and then they come into myself. It's like I can't, and that where I'm like, oh, and then it's like I'm like ding ding ding, all these things are like zing zing, like circuits are connected inside. I'm like, oh
pieces.
yeah, it's like that. And how much that helps me. And keeping with the puzzle metaphor, there are also pieces that are just not the right pieces. They got in the box and they don't even go to that puzzle.
I love that. I love that.
So then and it takes a long time, like,
to figure out that it's not a puzzle piece.
I'm like, oh, I mean, I would say, and some of that is like, for me, like, shame, are like these deeply ingrained, like, pathways of pathological, that like so I thought were the truth of my life, like I thought were real, and and it's like, and shame is one of them, and it's like, oh, actually, no, look at this. It's the total wrong shape, wrong size. This is to a puzzle that has,
Yeah, that feels so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's all, as we're talking about it, it's so exciting. I'm like, oh, it's so exciting.
Well, it's also like the wrong people in your life are not the right puzzle pieces is also something that I just came up for me, that is something more to feel at some point too. It's like, you just don't fit in the puzzle, dude.
Yeah. Right. Nothing personal.
Nothing personal, but you're in the jigsaw puzzle about, the firefighters, and I'm in the jigsaw puzzle about the jungle.
Yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
That seems like a good place.
So reactions.
Yay, we get to figure out what the reactions were. Well, if you tuned in, thank you. Let's make a commitment to, like, putting up getting the YouTube channel. It's a place where I get stuck because of all my ADHD stuff.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay. Well, then let's sit. What are you doing right now? Like, let's sit and open one up. Like, start a channel. Yeah. Well, not right now, but after we get off this.
Yikes. Okay. Cool. All right, we have a job to do. I hope you guys have a job to do. I hope you have a project. And we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.